Ex people of Reddit, what changed your views? When I was wounded in Iraq, two white guys stepped over me. One literally stepped on my back to get themselves to a safer place. A black guy picked me up like I was a child, carried me to safety, and held my hand until a medic got there. Perfect time for this quote by former President LBJ. If you can convince the lowest white man that he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice that you're picking his pockets. We're all the same, humans, but some people regardless of color will take advantage if they can, and there are those that will help you regardless of the color of your skin. Not all skin folk are kinfolk / not all kinfolk and good folk. Saw a lot of comments saying they don't understand this quote, so here's my LE5. Convince one group of people to think they are better than another group of people and you can get them to do anything in the name of superiority. Like set low wages, as long as they are making more than the other group. Live conditions and blame it on the others. So that's what the whole pickpocketing was about. You can take everything from them, hell they'll give it to you eagerly, like with the Trump donation scandal, as long as they feel like they're better than someone else and think you'll keep it that way. Also, they don't need to face reality. It goes thief / manipulator, group 1 / insecure people, group 2 / scapegoat. Hope that helps. By the way guys, if you are enjoying this video so far, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It will help us out quite a bit, and if you don't enjoy the videos in the future anymore, you can always unsubscribe. Let's get back to the video. Grew up with a stepdad, and although I never actually felt hate towards anyone, I would laugh at and repeat the jokes. Until I was kicked out at 18, I had only met a Mexican family, my adopted neighborhood family, and a black guy I was friends with from school. They also made the jokes about their race and laughed along depending on the crowd. Wasn't till I got older that they were doing that to fit in, and cold been living somewhat in fear. After being kicked out, I moved around a few times before finding a job working with developmentally disabled adults. I was hired as the white guy. The company and all the workers were all born in Africa and moved to the US. It was a cultural shock at first, but they immediately became family. They taught me how to cook, how to treat others, and their culture. They even made sure to teach me how they were treated in public by citizens and police. Since then I haven't made all after a single joke. I've made sure to look at everyone the same way no matter, and I've made sure to try and help others understand how their actions may not but they can still be hurtful. I've met so many beautiful people that I wouldn't have had the chance to talk to had I followed that influence growing up. If anyone who has thoughts and is reading this, please just sit down and have a meal with someone. You'll be surprised how much you have in common, while also having such different lives. Yeah, I was genuinely surprised when I realized how many people actually mean the jokes and how much they hurt people. I grew up in a school where people would joke about their background and get along, but it's not funny once you become an adult and see that people are genuinely disadvantaged by discrimination. Brother was we both love science fiction. One time he was talking about all the cool races in the Star Wars and Star Trek and Mass Effect universes. How creative Lucas and Roddenberry were. He talked about how great it would be to be among those races as a human and acquaint yourself with alien cultures and people and mythology. I said, you can't even mingle with the other races on your home planet. Maybe it was the weed, but what I said had some effect on him. He's very noticeably more tolerant and curious about other peoples now. I think he realized that his previous philosophies were not in line with those of the Federation. Good for him. Edit. No, I did realize what day it was. Nice coincidence though. May the force be with all of you. I've always found it weird that there are people who enjoy Star Trek, but are also intolerant. Star Trek is so blatantly anti-intolerance, I just don't see how they could enjoy it. I think some people watch Star Trek because they enjoy the military stylings and action-based episodes. I guess they aren't smart enough to read between the lines of all the allegorical stuff, or just unwilling to see it. Not me, but my grandpa told me that when he was young he was a bit due to his a-hole dad being really and teaching him to treat others of different races like trash. He told me this stopped though when he was around 13 when his dad left. He realized how stupid it was to judge others based on race, and I'm glad he realized how stupid it was, since he's a really sweet guy now. My grandparents used to tell me about my grandpa's evolution when it came to my grandma was born and raised in California. Her best friend in high school was a black girl named Sonja, and if memory serves, her parents also had black friends as well, and her father was born and raised in Louisiana. My grandfather was from Georgia. One time while he was still courting my grandma, she said they were talking on the sidewalk, and black couple was walking on the same sidewalk, coming towards them. Grandma thought nothing of it. Grandpa apparently shoved her behind him and shouted, "Get on the other side of the road, you insert slur here." Grandma was horrified. I don't know the details, but by the time my mom was born and in school, my grandparents were really good friends with a black couple who owned a bar that people of color frequented. My mom would tell me that more often than not, she and her brother and my grandparents would be the only white people around. The owners were even hosting a wedding one time, or one of their children was getting married, and the caterers backed out or flaked out for some reason. My grandparents and mom were invited as friends, but they ended up catering so that the family didn't have to worry about anything. By the time I came along, my grandpa was a totally different person, and while he never told me what helped him change his mind, I still liked hearing the story and the subsequent stories that showed his evolution. Edit. Got educated. Changed some words. My dad would make disparaging remarks about black people, Mexicans, Chinese people, etc. when I was a kid. I remember repeating those same sentiments and no one ever corrected me. In first grade, we were all assigned pen pals from a school in another city, and mine was a black girl named Chardonnay. I thought she had a weird name, and I was disappointed when I found out she wasn't white. Very soon after that, we learned some very basic info about the civil rights movement during Black History Month. Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, separate water fountains, segregated schools, stuff like that. After that, I felt really bad about being and wanting a different pen pal, and really ashamed of my dad and grandparents for thinking that way. And I was so mad that they'd taught me to think that way. After that, I was really happy to have the opportunity to write to my pen pal and get to know her better. I'm so thankful that my school started teaching us about early on. It's scary to think how I could have ended up if those sentiments had gone unchecked. I wasn't allowed to dance with a black boy in kindergarten. I thought it was stupid, and I was so embarrassed. Even as a child, it made no sense. I always hoped he had no idea what happened, because it hurt my heart, and I always thought he was cool. I was forbidden from being friends with my Hispanic best friend in first grade. I told her I couldn't be friends with her anymore and the reason why, and she appeared so hurt. My parent told me that, so I didn't know how terrible it was to say until I saw my friend's reaction. We remained friends throughout primary school, but as an adult, it hurts my heart that a little child had to hear from their friend that they couldn't be friends because of their race. My grandma grew up in Virginia in the 1900s. Being is just the default setting. Nana loved her family more than anything, though. So at one point in the late 1980s, she met her first not 100% white grandkid and discovered she still loved him. She made astounding late life progress, accepting that darker skin toned people were not only people, but family, friends and welcome in her house. All of my grandparents and great grandparents were born in S.E. Georgia, USA. Among the 5 that I knew, 4 grands and a great grandmother, they had a combined total of 34 years of formal education. Only my maternal grandmother finished high school. The educated grandmother was the only one that I ever heard use the N-word. Granny and grandpa and grandma and granddaddy would have killed me dead if they'd heard me use that word. Grandmother was just straight trash, and her mother, Granny, despaired that she'd raised such a person. Grandma was probably the closest thing I had to a fun grandparent, and her rule was I've never disliked anyone who makes music and dances. We usually attended the black church closest to her house when I was with her. Grandma, 1902 to 1997, liked the music there better than at her church. It was lovely. I moved away from my one-horse hometown and got away from my extremely prejudiced family. I didn't even live in a one-horse town. My hometown had one of the fastest growing zip codes in the country at one point before I left for college. However, the religious environment I grew up in, more the Catholic/Christian aspect of it, my religious upbringing is stupidly complex, was very and homophobic of course. I feel like those always go hand in hand. My father told me that the Bible says you shouldn't date outside your race, and that I would never date or marry a black or Hispanic man, because he didn't want his bloodline mixing with his. Don't worry, this wasn't his thoughts. He talked to God and God told him this. Jokes on him, after dating a bunch of loser, just so happened to be white guys, I was set up on a blind date with a man who happens to be Hispanic. That was 5 years, 5 pets, and a house purchase ago, and we are getting engaged any day now. I had to go through a journey to becoming a decent person before that, but it started pretty immediately after I went to college and started making friends that didn't have to be approved by my parents. Turns out all of the people my parents hate are actually really nice and supportive people once you treat them as humans. Meanwhile, all of the respect and courtesy in the world won't make my parents unless themselves. I didn't realize I was and being raised household until 4th grade. I was in a group project having to give a presentation to the class. My group was me and 2 black girls. My parents hated black women, black people in general, but especially black women, as they both watch tennis. You can guess all the is said about the Williams sisters. Meanwhile, there I was standing there watching my group mates talk. They were just as good, if not better than me, at talking in the class. Or understanding the material. Or anything really. I can still see that moment where the class fades away in my mind and one of my group mates is talking to the class, where I realize a fundamental truth. My parents were wrong. It still makes me sad thinking about stuff I remember saying as a kid, regurgitating things I heard my parents or relatives say, but in my experience, as I have gotten older, is that the one way to combat is to bring people into the same room. When people have shared experiences, that sense of otherness fades away. Of course, in 2021 and the internet bring what it is, it's really easy for people to hide in their own corners of the internet. But I'm thankful for that experience in 4th grade. I got in trouble a lot over the years for getting mad when family would throw around the N-word or lock their doors when they saw black people. But I knew I was right. And in the decades that have passed, nothing has tarnished or taken away that childhood lesson. As a lurker, this is a thread I can contribute to. From birth I was raised to be in a household that I was ignorant. I use the N-word, anti-Semitic, homophobic language every day. My immediate family and extended family all share the same ignorance. At family gatherings, if one of my older cousins let slip they were dating someone new, the first question would be, is S/she white? Followed by laughter, but the question was serious. Then I started middle school, 6th grade. On the first day of class I set down my backpack against the classroom wall, like every other student, while we found our desks and had a small meet and greet new classmates. I made sure to only speak to the kids, white, whom I knew from elementary school. Our teacher told us to take our seats. I'm 42 years old, and I remember this like it was yesterday. I picked up my backpack, found my desk. Before I could open my bag, the girl behind me told me she liked my earrings. Her mom wouldn't let her get her ears pierced until high school. Then I heard another voice from further behind me say, "Ms. K, this isn't my backpack." The backpack sitting on this girl's desk was identical to the one sitting next to my desk. We both opened our backpacks and realized we'd grabbed the wrong bag. Internally I rolled my eyes in disgust. This girl was a N. But I was taught to never let it show. So we met each other to quickly exchange. Her smile was beautiful. She wore glasses the same shape as mine. She wore her hair in a ponytail, just like mine. In our back to school shopping we picked the exact same backpack, and we picked the exact same Nikes, pink/white. Her name was Jacinda. I found myself genuinely smiling back to her and giggling like young girls do. That day she asked to sit together during lunch, and we sat beside each other for lunch every single day of middle school. She was my very first best friend. Jacinda taught me about her Sunday school classes. My family never attended church. We talked about everything important in the life of middle school girls. She wasn't allowed to attend my birthday parties, and I wasn't allowed to go to hers, but we always celebrated together at school. I loved her so much. When it was time to go to high school I continued in public school and her parents chose to homeschool her. I thought homeschooling was the coolest idea. Jacinda was, it's brilliantly intelligent. She was going to do great things for this world. Long before the age of social media, we lost touch sadly, but I still think of her often. After meeting Jacinda I never used another or derogatory word. Meeting Jacinda changed my life for the better. My dad was I was raised in a toxic environment and I guess some of his ideologies rubbed off on me. He was also violent when was involved, which was a lot of the time. Police would often arrest him to just get him in a cell for the night for being disorderly. On one occasion, the police turned up. One of them came into my room and sat with me as they dealt with my dad. He asked how I was, who I could talk to, etc. He was from a South Asian background. He was very kind to me and did his best in calming me down and giving me advice on dealing with this stuff. I was only about 15 at the time. As they were pulling my dad out, that same police officer was attacked by my dad after breaking free from another officer, breaking the officer's finger in the process, whilst also hurling verbal abuse at him. It wasn't long after the London bombings, so you can imagine what was said. My dad was also an electrician in Russell Square at the time, close to one of the blasts. The officer didn't react, probably knowing I was watching the commotion from my room or the fact he was a decent human being. My dad was convicted of multiple offenses against a police officer as well as a hate crime. The only silver lining was as my dad was being sentenced, the prosecutor was a black man who casually read out the testimony of the arresting officer of what my dad said that night. The prosecutor could barely keep a straight face, watching my dad hold his head in shame, dressed in plastic overalls, because he thought stuffing his clothes down the toilet of his jail cell and flooding the place would be funny. He got community service, probation and was required to attend rehab. He relapsed a few years ago and can barely walk or talk because of multiple strokes from continued dependency. The people responsible for protecting me from my dad were people of color. That sure as hell changes your perspective on things, even if you have the slightest ignorance towards another race. My situation was complicated growing up. My father was the son of an Italian immigrant with Egyptian roots, and he was so ungodly towards anyone not considered white as he considered himself white. The thing is, my dad has dark brown skin, dark brown eyes and black kinked curly hair. He looked exactly like the people he was against. And he hated Arabs, all Arabs, and he is part Arab. This was so confusing. He also hated gay people, Muslims, commies and any type of alternative lifestyles. My father hated black people the most. He told me if I ever brought home a black boyfriend he would disown me. He told me, as a small child, that if I misbehaved I would be sent to live with a **** family in the ghetto. He was equally misogynist and held on to a strong patriarchal mindset. I admit, as a kid I repeated his words. All the other kids did too on my neighborhood, so I thought he was right. It wasn't until I was literally in my 30s did I realize the internalized I still held on to. All my partners and friends were white my entire life. I felt unsafe near a group of black men. It was only until I moved to Northern Europe that I realized that I'm not considered white here and experienced myself, and oh wow, what an eye-opener. I began to dismantle my entire thought process, and honestly, I'm so repulsed by my father now I can't even speak to him without feeling disgusting inside. He's really old now and much more calm, and probably won't live more than 10 years. I have not returned to my birth country to see him in almost 7 years because I'm so angry at him. Because of his I missed out on friendships, relationships, and understanding cultures different from my own. I'm making up for it now as the immigrant community that I live in is amazing and supportive, but I will never get back that lost time, and I will never know fully the extent of damage that my hateful words may have done to people who didn't deserve it. I know this isn't the exact question, but I was raised in a strict military Republican household. Though my family wasn't, they were extremely homophobic, and beloved women belong in the home and in their place. They would make fun of lesbians and gay men throughout my whole life, speak poorly of women working outside the home. When I was 18 I met a guy at my local coffee shop in a very red town/state. I couldn't decide if I wanted to date him or take him shopping and hang out. He was just super cool. We made plans and later ate hot wings and drank wine. I had never felt more myself than when I was with him. I had to forgot any financial adult backing in college because my new lifestyle didn't meet my family's ideas. This was absolutely okay with me, and I charged through challenge happily while accumulating debt. Turns out he ran away from his home and was cut off from his family for being gay. He became my roommate for more than 9 years and my best friend in the world, and my roommate I mean I always had a place for him to stay in my own home. And he always seemed to move right in the most natural way possible. Literally, he just was always there in my home through every stage of life for a decade. He introduced me to the gay community, and as a female, instead of getting a club, I could go out dancing with him and have a blast and be safe all night. He became my family and closest confidant over the years. My family didn't take kindly to this friendship, nor did they like that I became a business owner. They no longer speak to me, and I'm so happy to be the black sheep. Anyway, I'm so glad I met him, and he changed my life. I would have been comfortable in my conservative bubble, and probably never questioned my views. His friendship made me open my eyes to not only the world of possibilities, but also my own views of what I was raised with. He challenged me and made me a better person, and I'll always be grateful for the absolute gift he gave me. Because I was now a safe person with views different than what my small town was used to, I became a safe friend for people to come out to. And my god, it's been the honor of my life to grow, find acceptance, and apply acceptance blindly. Not me, but my first roommate out of college, who grew up in rural PA, told me that watching New Girl made her less. Her parents were super, and her brother was a literal neon convicted of a hate crime. But watching the show in her teens and seeing people of a bunch of different races have normal and positive interactions was mind-blowing, because her parents literally taught her it was impossible. That opened her up to meeting all different types of people. Then she went to college and met people from all different backgrounds and became good friends and formed relationships with them. She even ended up marrying a mixed race man, and they're quite happy with a baby. Her family does not speak to her, but I'm certain she's better off. Wow, someone who grew up watching New Girl is now married and has a kid after college. I feel so old, haha. This is the end of the video. Thank you guys for staying with me till the end. If you enjoyed watching this, you might as well watch these too.